Welcome back to the channel, and today we are in the garage and we are about to start the first modification on the M2, and it's to address probably the one thing that bugs me most about this car. I absolutely love the car. I've had it now a couple of months and it's brilliant. However, there's one thing that does bug me, and that is the ride height. Unfortunately, I didn't think ahead and didn't put the car outside to take a before shot, but what I'll do is I'll put up a still image now of how the car sits on its standard suspension. And so it probably goes without saying that in this video we're going to be lowering the M2. As you'll see from that image, you can see the car sits a little bit too tall for my liking. It is a sports car, and I just think that the suspension's not set up in a, it doesn't really have that sports car stance. Plus it has this weird BMW thing, which they all seem to have, where the front arch has a much bigger gap than the back one. It was always my intention that the first modification would be to lower the car, so that's what I'm going to be doing today. Lowering cars is quite a contentious subject and everyone has their own opinion, and it's probably fair to say that eventually I will probably get a full set of coilovers for this car. However, at the moment, having just bought the car and there's lots of other modifications I want to do, I wasn't about to go and spend £2,500–3,000 on a set of coilover. I just want something that improves the aesthetics, makes the car corner a bit flatter. I'm not even that bothered that if it stiffens up the ride a little bit. I don't think the ride on the M2 is particularly compliant anyway over bumpy roads. It's quite a rough ride. I've decided to go for H&R springs. Just forget that for a minute, we'll come back to that in a sec. And this kit lowers the car 30mm at the front and 20mm at the back, which should address that unevenness. It will give the car a little bit of forward rake, but again, I think that's going to look pretty cool. So let's crack on. That is enough talking for now, and let's just crack on with it. So I said ignore this spring earlier, and that is because I've already started. And I won't say I forgot to film, I just got a bit carried away. My brother came round, we got the car up on its jack stands, and yeah, we just kind of went for it. The camera wasn't in the garage. I thought I'll just film the other side. Now, of course, I'm doing this in my garage, and ideally I'd love to do this on a lift. It'd be so much easier on a lift, but A, I don't have the space or the money for a lift, so I'm having to do it on the floor with a jack and jack stands. When you do the fronts, there is a central jacking point, but on these, there's not really a very good place to jack them up from the rear. The plan was to jack it up centrally, so there is a subframe under here, which I'll show you in a second. But it's not got the most contact area in the world. So in the end, I actually decided to jack it up from the corner of the subframe because there's a bit more space there to put the jack on. We did try to put it onto two jack stands. It just got a bit dodgy because of the angle of the jack. So what I decided to do was just do one side, jack it up, get it on the axle stand, complete everything, put it down, and then do the other side afterwards. So that's what we're going to do tonight. This light is actually the garage light from my old house because we didn't have electric in the garage, so we used to have to run an extension lead into the house. But it's actually really useful. Got some light in here, but these aren't the brightest, and obviously working under the car. This is great. Just turn it on and slide it under the car. So as I said, this side I have already done. Don't think it's sitting exactly how it should do yet. Hopefully not through my incorrect instalment. It's just that the car's been up on the jack. It's sitting on its own weight. However, the other side obviously has the old spring in it, so I think it's just holding it up at the moment. We should lose a bit of its arch gap. I have measured it with the really scientific finger method. Can now only can't really get 2 fingers in, whereas on the other side, 2 fingers goes in a lot further.
Hey, that's what she said.
I'm not sure this is the nicest way to measure it. So let me just show you what I did do the other night. This side is all done, and the process I'm going to take you through on the other side is exactly the same. The only difference, if we can get in here, so you can see that bar coming down there, that is the ride height sensor for the headlamps, or for the headlights, I believe. So you have to disconnect that as well, because you drop, can't see my fingers, too zoomed in. So you have to drop that bar down, and that would stop it dropping down. It's just a 10mm spanner. So the first thing to do, is to get the car up in the air, and I'll show you where I've jacked it from. Disclaimer, I am not a trained mechanic. I am a tool with some tools, so don't follow this as a absolute how-to, although I'll probably call it how to fit springs on M2, but don't, legally, for legal reasons, I have to say that I'm not a trained professional, that you shouldn't follow my instructions. Okay, so I don't think you see that, but I'm jacking up on the corner of the rear beam, rear subframe, whatever you want to call it. It just seems like the best place to do it because there's plenty of surface area there for you to get the jack on. Well, that probably took longer than the actual fitting of the spring will. I don't know about anyone else, but doing this, putting cars on jack stands, just scares the shit out of me. Especially when you're doing it on your own, so you're kind of trying to monitor the jack to make sure that's going down okay, it's not slipping or anything. But also in this situation, I'm trying to make sure that that rubber that the jack stand is sitting on is not touching this skirt. Luckily, I can still, can't really see, but I can still bend it. It's not actually touching it, although it's very, very close. So it goes without saying, loosen off your wheel bolts before you jack the car up, or you might have problems with the wheel spinning or trying to do it up against the handbrake. And also, safety first, chuck the front wheels, stop the car running away. I don't know how true that is, but. Alright, so we're under the car now, and to remove the old spring we need to drop this lower control arm, and you can do this a couple of ways. So you can do it at this end at the hub, but that is a camber bolt, so you can be careful and mark the position of it and put it back as it is, and then you shouldn't affect the camber too much. Of course, once you've fitted the spring, you want to go and get an alignment anyway once the springs have settled. However, you can do it another way. So we'll undo this bolt here, which is the one for the shock, and you can undo it from the other end down there. Going to start off by taking out undoing the bolt for the strut. So that's this one here, and that's an 18. So I need an 18 both sides to do that. So this one's not that bad, it's the other one that's the tight one. Once it's loose, the other side will start to spin. So then you need to put some, and it will probably make this horrible noise because the exposed end of the threads will have a tiny bit of kind of corrosion surface and surface dirt on them. So, but it's pretty easy. Let's see, now super easy. Note to self: lay the bolts out as they come out. Now that's pretty loose because the suspension's on full droop, so there's no pressure on it. But in a minute, when we undo the other bolt, we will jack this arm up from here, well, to take the weight of this arm for when it comes down. But before we do that, we need to undo this bolt over here, which is the more difficult one, mainly because of clearance. So if you can see, I'll get the camera in the right place. See that nut there? It's too close to that, wherever that is, part of the subframe, I guess, to get a socket and a bar on it or anything like that. So you'll need a spanner, and you have to give it a good old yank. So little update: we've got it broken, and we're making progress. So you can see the end of the spanner. So you can't really see, but I've broken it. Not broken it. I've got the tension off it. So I'll show you the setup that I used. So what we've got is we've got the 1mm socket on this side with the long bar braced against the floor. So once you've once you've kind of broken it, then actually the actual bolt, even though they're still connected, will spin within the joint, so you can kind of get things where you need them. Then what I did is I put a spanner, and this is the bit that's going to be hard to see. So you saw where the spanner was, down there. You see it, just through that gap. So what I did is I put it on there, and then you can just call me Jay the Foot. Put my foot on the spanner here. Obviously I had to have it on a bit of a lower angle, and then you can use all your leg muscles to break that. It is slow progress. At this point, you wish you hadn't cheaped out. I didn't have a 21mm spanner, so I had to order one. And I looked in like B&Q, because I happened to be in there. It was like 10 quid. I was like, oh, not so bad. Let me just check Amazon. Well, this was £3.98 or something like that. Premium tool, only took premium tool brands in this garage. Silverline. Why oh why didn't I just spend the extra? I think it was like an extra £6. I could have got a ratchet version, or ratchet on this end. Would have made it so much easier, because at the moment I'm literally like quarter turn, take it off, put it back on, quarter turn, and there's a long old thread.
2,000 years later.
Took ages, but the nut is finally off, and it is just tight all the way through. You can see now I've started to wind this bolt out. As I've said, this is threaded. Yeah, this took a long time. So now you've just got to wind it out on this side, which again takes quite a long time. But before we wind it all the way out, what we want to do is put the jack here just to support the weight of the lower arm. It won't like kind of, well, on my experience from the other side, it won't come shooting down as soon as that bolt comes out. The shock bolt is loose. In fact, it's kind of, it's just free in there, so there's no tension on there. There's no real tension on that either, but just to take the weight so you can lower it down gently on the jack afterwards. Right, so that bolt is about halfway out maybe, and here's another argument as to why I should have bought the 21mm ratchet spanner rather than like the solid end one, because we are literally running out of space here. So the exhaust pipe sits there, and you'll very quickly close that gap, and you can't get a ratchet and a socket in there. So now I'm going to have to wind the rest of this out, you guessed it, with the manual spanner. I don't know, it's at points like this where you start questioning your own life choices. Right boys, it took a long time, but we are there. The bolt is out, so this is why you jack it up to hold the arm. Yeah, so anyway, it's out, and this is why you jack it up, because now you could just ease off the jack. This is going to drop down, and so will the arm. And then now we can just pull the spring out. It's a little bit awkward because the spring's a bit heavy. So we're going to need this. This is the lower spring seat, and then watch is falling out of the car on its own. Where is it? This, which is the upper spring seat. So before we put these on, I'm going to give them a bit of a clean. Just a bit of all-purpose cleaner in it. Microfiber. Just going to clean the contact area where the spring sits. I mean, I don't know, it's not super necessary, but my OCD likes it, so we'll just, it won't be perfect, but we'll just give that a clean up. And the bottom one. So, remember I was saying about the lower arms, to see this nipple on here, that bottom edge? There's two holes in the lower arm, and this goes in the one that is closest to the knuckle, i.e. where the brake disc is and the hub. Right, so we're now ready for reassembly, so make sure you've got the spring up the right way. Telltale sign is make sure the font's the right way. And put the bottom mount on. So just want to make sure that the spring at this end is sitting in the end of this, I don't know what the technical term is, but stop end? I don't know. But make sure it just goes back how it was on the other spring, so it's all in there properly. You get to this end, the end of the spring's in there. And then for the top, it's exactly the same. It's got an end in it. So just put the spring in there and twist it around until it's back, until it reaches that end stop. Make sure it's on properly. And now it's ready to go back in the car. And then make sure the spring, as I said, make sure that spring, like that little nipple that's on that lower spring mount, is located in that hole that's closest to the well, it's to the suspension strut. And then once you've got that back in place, ow, you can use your jack to lift the arm back up, making sure that you get the spring back in the cup at the top. Just give it a feel around and make sure that the spring is still sat where it's supposed to be in that top mount. As you use the jack to lift the spring, well, lift the arm of course, we need to make sure that the arm is lining up the connection to the subframe at the back. It's literally time now just to reverse all the steps and put it back together. One bit of advice: make sure you've got this side of the arm and the other side of the arm aligned with the subframe before you start trying to put the bolt through. Because what can happen is you can go through one side and then start pushing the arm on the other side because it's not lined up. So check both sides, make sure you've got the jack in the right place, it's all lined up, and then you can send the bolt back through. Unfortunately, you have the same clearance issues going back in as you did taking it out. So again, I'd recommend getting a 21mm ratchet spanner. Would make this a whole lot easier, because until you've got this about halfway wound in, you are not getting a socket on it. Still going. I think at this rate it might be quicker to actually order a ratchet spanner from Amazon. And then you get to the joyful moment where you can get the socket and ratchet back on it, and progress speeds up a little bit. Right, I'm just taking a break from doing that. That bolt, it's the bolt that never ends, Jesus. So just one thing to remember, when you do get to the point where you've got these bolts pinched up and you're doing them up tight, what you want to do is to jack up the strut almost to the point where it's lifting the car off of the jack stand. Just be careful, but where it's taking the weight, before you do the do kind of the final tightening when you torque these nuts. I think because this is not a professional opinion, but the bolt is screwing through the center of that subframe, which has a thread, and then you've got a nut on the end. So I think just tight will probably suffice. However, I will talk in spec. Okay, a bit of swearing and a lot of effort later. The nut, the bolt and that nut are done up tight. Just a reminder to put that rear arm under tension before you do these nuts up. It's just something to do with not twisting the bushings, so they should be done up under stress, so to speak. So I've got that arm jacked right up. I'm going to do the final tightening. Thank God that the fronts are way easier. So if you like doing things hard and then do the easy thing, my personal preference, if I know something is going to be more difficult, I'll do that bit first, then do the easy bit afterwards. And the fronts apparently are much easier because you've only got 2 bolts to undo and they're not 4 miles long. So this is all back together. Now it's just time to put the wheel back on. So that took a long time. Probably would have been a lot quicker if I had a 21mm ratchet spanner to do that bolt on the subframe, because just doing it manually was miserable. So the car's back down on the ground. It should settle a bit more. You get what I was saying. So even with the drop, so it exaggerates it now. And look at the front arch gap. Wowzers. So I'm going to tackle those tomorrow. The battery in this camera is about to die. My battery is about to die. It's nearly midnight. And today's a new day? What am I talking about? Tomorrow is a new day. And we'll start tackling the fronts. Let's just see if we can get that down a little bit maybe. Has that done anything? I'm not so sure. 2 fingers? Yeah, we still got, wow. Can't get 2 fingers in there at all. I think that's coming down. So we'll leave it overnight. And then tomorrow, hopefully we'll come in the garage and that'll be sitting a little bit lower. We'll get the fronts done and should be looking sweet. So I'll see you guys tomorrow.
The next day.
Welcome back. It's day 2 of spring fitting, or day 2 evening of spring fitting, and I've actually got the car out of the garage. Oh, another plate's coming off. I just noticed. Brilliant. New sticky pads required. Right. So the car has just been back on the jack, so the suspension's probably a little bit higher than it will be. That's going to settle down a little bit. I think we're definitely going to need some spacers. Looks a bit too sunken, especially the way that the Pilot Super Sport tyres kind of curve in from the rim. Yeah, I think we need a spacer. Hopefully, I'm not going to go too aggressive because I don't want stone chips. But you can see how it's sitting now. Right, so I've got the car in diagonal. I could get it a bit more diagonal, but it just makes it harder to get out, and I'll explain why we don't want to make it any more diagonal, and that's because I'm going to need to put the car up onto the race ramps, because although I think I could probably get it on the jack. I get the jack under the centre of the car as it is now, but after the springs are fitted it might be a bit tight to be able to get the jack back out again. So I think the easiest idea, rather than being a bit sketchy and driving up onto the ramps in the garage when I'm here on my own and I've got no one to guide me or anything like that, I'll just quickly jack up each side and put the race ramp underneath each wheel, and then once it's up on that, then we'll jack from the centre point. So these cars have actually got a centre jacking point which approximately somewhere around here. It's quite far in, but it's a lot easier to jack up the whole front than it is at the back where there's no dedicated jacking point. Sneaking suspicion here that I've not left myself enough space to get the jack under the car, but we'll see. Right, so we've got the trusty light bar under there, so you should be able to see the jacking point. There it is. So it's quite far back. That's where we'll get the jack onto. Got the jack situated. However, there's a couple of things that we need to do before we jack the car up and get it up on axle stands. The first one being loosening off the wheel bolts, and then the other one we'll come to in a second. The second thing we need to do is under the bonnet. I need to take these covers off here. It's just like a little 10mm socket will do that. A 10mm spanner. Something. What we got? Where's that 10mm spanner? Like they're not actual nuts, they're just like a 50-degree turn. The reason we're taking this off is because you need to take this off to remove all of this so that you can get to the strut top nut. And then it's just a little clip here, and then this whole section comes out. Now I can put this, but I'm not going to step on it. Perfect. Top of the dog's crate, and then the same on this side. So we can see, see why I put a cover there. That's pretty ugly. All right, then need to remove this trim out of the way. And if I remember correctly, there's a little pin. Yeah, there's like a little push fixing here. Can't do it with my fingers. Yeah. Should I take that out? Probably if I don't, I'll drop it and it'll go in the engine bay somewhere. So we'll take that out. We'll take that out properly. Okay. And then you're able to pull this rubber cover off. Oh, completely off in this case. And then that gives you access to the top strut nut. You can see BMW have actually marked it with paint to show that when it was done up. Now this is the reason why we've not jacked the car up yet. We want this under load when we undo it, and in a second I'll go and grab a special socket that you're going to need to get this off, but we're just going to take the rubber seal off the other side now. Remove this rubber trim, just move it out of the way. Okay, so this top strut nut is quite recessed, so you're not going to get a ring spanner on it. It's got some very deep ones, plus you probably won't be able to get enough leverage. And then the actual strut is a 10mm. Again, it's another one of those tricky, well, I won't say tricky subjects, people have different opinion. Some people literally say grab an impact gun and impact it off. I've been doing it for years, I've never had any problems, but from what I understand, if you do that, what it can do is actually spin the strut, and in some suspension, I don't know if it's all suspension, but in some suspension you've got a nut on the other end, so you could actually spin the nut off the other end, and that's inside the shock itself, and then you're a bit screwed. So the best way to do it is to undo the nut whilst holding the centre of the strut, and to do that you need a little special socket tool. This is the tool you're going to need. It's a Strut Socket, or I think I've also seen it called an easy access socket. I got it online. The company's called Strava or something that make it. I got it from a third-party seller. I know if this is a typical BMW thing just to use random sized tools, but it is an 18, so you can find it more readily available from, like, say, a Machine Mart, but they just don't do sets with 18s in. It always just goes from 17 to 19, so I'd say you kind of just have to get it on its own, and it was 20 quid. I guess that's what you call M-tax. Let me show you how it works. So it's just a socket at the end of the day. So it goes on the strut like that, and then, as I said before, the inside of this, the actual strut itself has like a 10mm head on it. So you can then use, it's easier with like one of these deep, what do you call it? So you can put the socket on the strut nut like that, and then you can hold the actual strut with a 10mm spanner, and then you can just break it loose. This one I actually got a bit carried away and I've already done it. It's quite tight, but I just did it with a regular old ratchet on it. Didn't need a long bar, just a slightly hefty ratchet. So we'll do the other side. There we go. Now of course, the window's only small, so you will have to keep moving the ratchet round, or the spanner around, so that you can get another turn on it. But now that's loosened off, we can jack the car up, get it up on axle stands. Yeah, axle stands seem good. So now we can get the wheel off. Here we're only undoing the top strut nut, so rather than taking the top mount out, there's no need. We're just gonna undo that top nut, drop the strut down, and then pull it out from under the arch. But to do that, we will need to take off this, where is it? This sway bar link here. And if I remember correctly, I think it's a 16. It's a 16, and then you also need a Torx bit to put in the end to stop it spinning. We also need to, I think, unclip this, and also this one at the back here, which you can just do with a flathead screwdriver. What we will need to undo is this little box here, which just holds a couple of the lines, and unclip them from here so that when we pull the strut out, it doesn't put any tension on any of these lines. Okay, so just pop this little box open, and then we can pull this out. This one slot from here. This one slot from here. There we go, so that's all free. Okay, so I ended up using a 16 on an extension just to break it free. What you might find is that when you start spinning it, it can spin the whole drop link. If I'm using the wrong term, I'm so tired, I can't remember what I said. But if it can spin this other end, and that's why I use the Torx in the middle and a spanner around the actual nut. But let's just get this off first, and then we'll come back to what we need to do next. Jesus, 15 minutes my ass. This thing's a pain. There's so little room in there, it's hard to get the spanner. So you see we've got that Torx bit in the middle holding it, but I'm going to use a spanner with literally 8 turns over and over again. Finally managed to work out a system that works, and this is off. Out. Now. So essentially, there are some tabs on the other side of this that make you might see them and think, oh, I need to bend these up. Actually, all you need to do is put you can see in this gap here, I've just lifted it up, just put a screwdriver into that gap and then just leave it up, just a small flathead, and it'll come out. Finally, I've won. I'm about to put it back in that way. Okay, so now we can take this line out. Oh, you just push it to the side. There we go. Right. Now it's finally time to undo the top nut and drop this strut out. So what you're going to need to do next is get the jack and put it under this knuckle here and jack it up to take the load. Then we can undo the top strut nut, and then we can drop it down. This nut is now fully loose, so don't even need to hold the centre of the strut. Right. Of course, the suspension below is tensioned up. So there's it's a 12-sided nut, I think it's called. But that's all undone now. And now we're nearly getting to the good stuff. So everything, I'll just go back down here and check. Everything's disconnected brake lines. This is the wear sensor, I believe, and the arm. So now we should be able to lower this down, and then we'll be able to compress the strut down and pull it outside. Now we will, in a second, where is he? Get a dirty rag to put on top of the strut, and that's just to stop you scratching the crap out of your arch if the strut's not fully down. It will be tight, but it should be able to go once you've put the suspension back down to full droop. Okay, so you can see that the strut's fully free. Careful because it's bloody heavy. I'm going to put a rag over the top of this. Oh my god, that was bloody tight. That was some finagling. You might have to push the lower arm down lower than it just goes naturally. So, oh my god, we got there in the end. I am sweating. That was scary. So now it's relatively simple. I'm just going to take the spring and the dust boot off. And also the bump stop will come off, because you get a new bump stop in the pack with the springs. But we are going to retain this dust boot. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and put the bump stop on. Just clear any debris out of this spring seat. I'm going to take this dust boot and put that in there. And then if you spin it round, you'll see there's like a bit of an end stop for the rubber, so just push that up to there, and then this can go back on. And then once you see the spring there, you'll see there's, if I twist it, you'll see there's an end stop on the strut there, so make sure the spring's pushed up against that. And then this is going to be the fun part, because the strut's no longer on the jack, so we need to get this back in the arch and then back up into the top mount. Now if you do put a bit of pressure on the strut, you can actually squish it back in. Watch your hands, because it will, of course, it rebounds back out. Okay, we're back in. So then it's just a case of lining the strut up, and we need to get the jack back under this arm to help us push it back up into the top mount. Just going to make sure that everything's where it should be, which it is. And then somehow I'm going to jack this up whilst holding it. Okay, so we're nearly there. Oh, we zoom right in again. No, we're not. Nearly there. Strut's kind of in the right place, just need to line it up. Now got the spring most of the way up. The strut is poking through the top mount. And you just want to make sure that with all of that stuff you've been doing, that this is still sitting in the same place. That top rubber seal is still sitting where it was before. The spring's sitting in the right place. Looks like it is. And this is where it's a bit back and forth, especially if you're doing this on your own, because you're jacking the strut up, but you also need to keep checking to make sure it's in line. You can see the, you see that? The strut's actually poking through now, so that's kind of in, but we just want to make sure that everything's sitting in the right place now before we start kind of sandwiching the two parts together. Whoever said this was a 15-minute job, each side, was lying. And that's done up as tight as it will be now without spinning the strut, so that's all good. We'll leave tightening that right up until the weight of the car is back on the suspension, and then we can torque it up appropriately. Now I just need to reconnect everything that I disconnected in here. You saw me disconnect it, so welcome to the time lapse. that's it. One side done. Just a whole nother side to do. I don't know if I can be asked to do it now. What time is it? 11:15. No, I think I'll call it a night and we'll tackle the other one tomorrow. Yeah, a bit disappointing. I thought I'd get both done tonight. Definitely not a 15-minute job. I mean, probably if you're maybe a better mechanic, got better tools, got a lift, maybe any of those things, you can probably do it in 15 minutes. I mean, most of the time was taken getting the car up on the jack stands, but once you've done that, it is kind of easy. It's only 2 bolts, but it's all the wrestling, man. The space is tight and all these fiddly little connectors and stuff, but it is achievable, and you get a sense of achievement from doing it yourself. It's gonna look cool. I'm really excited to see it on the floor, sitting in the correct ride height with all the springs fitted and it all settled. Oh god, number plate's coming off again. I'll have to sort that out. But I think for today, I'm gonna just call it quits, because I'll do it. Just give me another midnight, and I was in here till midnight last night. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow.
3 days later.
Welcome back. It's now Saturday. Didn't go in the garage last night. I was too tired after work. So I thought I might as well wait until today, where I've got the whole day. Plus it's horrible and raining outside, so there's not much else to do. Put the wheel back on this side. I've also jacked up the arm and torqued this strut nut. Realigned this blue line that was on there from, I'm guessing, from factory. So now we're just going to move on to the other side, which is exactly the same procedure, bar one thing, which I'll show you when we get to it. And so probably less talking and more time lapse. The only thing that's slightly different on this side is that you've got 2 lines. From the other side, there was one single line, and on this side you've got 2. I can't remember what they are. I know one's a wear sensor, and I think the other one, ABS sensor possibly, but it's same procedure. We still need to take them out of this box here at the back, and out of these clips here, just so they're free, and then this clip in the back we've got to take out again. So that's what we're doing now. Okay, I'll probably like all done, and it was a bit of a mammoth task. So I think if you were to spend a day, you could easily get it done in a day. So I don't know if it'll come across in the video. I've done this across a few evenings. So I did one rear corner one evening, I did the other rear corner the next evening, and I'm just fitting this around work and dinner and stuff like that, and even activities. So I think easily in a day you get it done. I did the front this morning. I don't know if it'll come across in the footage, depends how I time lapse it or whatever, but once you've got it up in the air, I think hour maximum. If you're taking your time, I mean, you can rush it, you probably do it quicker. I have done springs before, so I kind of knew the process. It's just always some little idiosyncrasies that are different between different cars and things like that. However, let's have a look at the finished article. Now bear in mind, this has just come off the jack stands. I think that's a great height at the front. I'm a little bit annoyed. Well, not annoyed, but if you see I've got the winglets either side. I was hoping to get, and I can't remember the name of the make, but there's a company that make a bit that goes in the middle, which is quite cool. My brother just guided me out the garage, and it's quite close at the front, so I'll have to do some research about how much more that hangs down, or my garage lip will have to build up. And yeah, I think that just looks mean at the front. We're on to the back. Oh, so much better. How it should have come from the factory, really. That looks so much more squat. And of course from the side. So we've still got a bit of gap at the back, still got a bit of gap at the front, but that is way lower, and you can see that those two arch gaps, the back and the front, much more consistent. It gives it a tiny, my drives a bit on the slope, so it gives that tiny bit of rake, which I think just really sets the car off. It makes everything else, and this sounds stupid, but it makes everything else pop. So now like the rear winglet, the front winglets, just it ties it in so much better. Now the wheel's more in the arch, and like I said, this has just come off the stands, and I've driven it a few hundred meters down the road, so I think this will come down a little bit more. I wouldn't want it to come too much more, but a little bit more. The fitment I think looks mega. I will be getting spacers, and you can't really tell from this angle. I think it looks okay, but it's when you go from this angle, the front wheel does look a little bit lost in the arch because of these tyres. So another way you could fix it, if you're ready for new tyres, is you can go up a size on these with no problems, and you can run no spacer and have nice fitment. But for now, my tyres have got loads of meat left on them, so I'm not going to be changing those anytime soon. It's just because of the way that the tyre curves up, kind of gets it lost in the arch. So I think we're going to get some spacers. Not decided on size. I think 10's a safe bet. Some other people say 7.5. There are some people running 12 all round, or 12 at the front and 10 at the back. But the problem is, the more you bring out the front wheel, the more it kicks up. The more it kicks up stones along this side of the car. Hence why you have this impact zone with PPF on it there. Fitment at the back, it's not far off. Probably needs less than the front, but I don't know. I suppose it depends what kind of look you're going for. Overall, I'm super happy. Overall, I'm super happy. I think this looks great. As I said, driven it a few hundred meters, steering wheel seems straight, as it should be, as long as you've not knocked anything out. And we've got no creaking going from lock to lock or anything, but I'll have to wait until I've driven it properly, which I'll do shortly. So yeah, I really hope you guys found this video useful. I know it's not like the most technical of DIYs, but I enjoy just watching people work on their cars regardless of what it is. So if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Drop a comment below if there's anything you'd love to see me do with the M2. Any suggestions of mods you think I should do next. And please really consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. I'm a really small channel, tiny channel, and I know my uploads are quite infrequent. However, I do really want to grow this channel. It's just at the moment, this is like the busiest time of the year for my work, so I don't have as much time to put into it and find time to edit and stuff like that. But there's more videos to come. I've already got a couple of other small modifications which I'll be doing shortly, just to set the exterior off.